All right, so you guys have a copy of this common rule on your chair, and we're going to discuss that a little later. I want to give an introduction to it, probably about 30, 35 minutes, and then I'd love to have some Q&A and some discussion. So without further ado, let me go ahead and tell you what I want to tell you, and then we can talk about it. So I want to start tonight asking you to picture a painting that you have probably almost certainly seen before. You've probably seen it so much that you think it's trite. Van Gogh's Starry Night. All right, so picture that evening sky. Picture that village in the valley. Picture those bright swirls of light up in the heavens. And you may or may not know that if you look down in the valley, there's a church down in the valley. And while all the homes in the valley have lights on in the windows, the church lights are off. It's almost as if Van Gogh painted the light drifting out of the church up into the heavens, swirling around in those globes that he so loved to paint. You also may or may not know that Van Gogh was a man who was absolutely plagued by what it meant to find God. He was a son of a pastor, and he carried a terrible hatred for his father's beliefs, which he found dogmatic. But he actually tried to become a pastor himself. And then he was a failed evangelist before he found his true calling in painting. So he never lost this longing for the divine and the infinite. And later in life he would say, when I have a terrible need of, shall I say the word, religion, then I go out and I paint the stars. What troubles me is how true and even more true this story is today. That is, I think many look on the church and the people in it, and they see a lot of claims, they see a lot of beliefs, they see some words, but they see lives without light. They see people who do have different beliefs, but whose lives look every bit as disordered, as frenzied, as chaotic, as confused, and as misunderstood as theirs are. And I think that they have a good point. I think that we have made a fatal assumption, at least in our modern church, that if we get our thinking right, then our lives will just follow along. And because of that, we've done a lot of focus on worldview and right belief, which is essential, but it comes at the cost of the 70 to 80% of our lives that's actually just habit. The philosopher William James said that our lives are but a mass of habits. And one of my main goals tonight is to turn this assumption on its head for you. I want to convince you that your most ordinary, boring, repetitive habits are actually something much, much more than that. They're acts of worship. And because they are worship, they form us. The psalmist writes in Psalm 115:8, "Those who make and trust in idols will become like them." So I think in missing this connection between habit and formation, we become people who do not live the lives of light that Van Gogh was looking for. We become people who profess peace, but are formed in anxiety. We become people who profess hope, but spend their lives being formed in despair. And there's two reasons I care about this. Okay? First, I care about you and me. I know many of you, and I know that you're looking for the Lord. I know you want to find Him. And I know you want to find His presence, not just at the mountaintop experiences or the special set-aside times. I know you want to find Him in the regular, ordinary life of changing kids' clothes, of balancing budgets, of meeting work deadlines, of waking and sleeping. I know you're looking for that. And I want us to find it. But second, I want us to find our neighbors. Right? I believe that so many of our neighbors, like Van Gogh, are actually looking for the light. Not just in spite of this so-called secular America, but precisely because this disenchanted land has tried to turn off all the lights in the heavens and told us to look inward to find something. And of course, looking there, we find nothing but our own darkness. And thus we become people who, like Van Gogh, no matter how many beliefs we reject in words, we can't stop looking, and our neighbors can't stop looking for that point in the valley where the light comes in, where the divine light breaks in. So I submit to you tonight that in ordering our lives of habit, we will not only just find God, but we might actually find our neighbors as well. So I'm going to do this in two parts. First, I want to convince you that there is a problem, a crisis of habits. And second, I want to introduce you to one possible solution called the common rule, which is nothing more than some ancient spiritual disciplines. It comes from the idea of a rule of life, which the monastics and many others have had. It's a set of recurring spiritual rhythms. And this is just a common rule is formed into some modern practices intended to address certain things that pull us away from loving God and loving neighbor. So first, let me try to tell you some stories and convince you that we have a problem. 5 years ago, I was a missionary in China, and I moved back to the States with a mission. Right? I wanted to become a missionary to law and business. So I had a goal. I went to law school. I moved down here to start as a mergers and acquisitions lawyer at Wire Woods, where I still work. And at the time, I felt I was moving 1,000 miles an hour. Okay, my life, even though I had a mission, looked exactly like what all the crazy other top law school students look like. It was packed with meetings. Something was always buzzing. Screens were always alerting. I had tons of obligations. I never said no to anything. I was chasing after everything to fulfill my calling. And I think you could say that the house of my life was decorated with Christian content. It really was. But the architecture, I believe, was exactly the same as everybody else's. And it was working great. I thought it was the best time of my life, until it wasn't, until the bottom fell out. One night, just a few months after moving to Richmond and beginning my new job, I was dozing off in bed when suddenly I lurched awake to a feeling of existential terror. Almost like somebody was in the room. It was so strange that I told my wife about it, managed to fall back asleep. The night after that, same thing happened, but I never fell back asleep. And the night after that, it happened again. And after about 48 plus hours of not sleeping, I ended up in the emergency room where the doctors told me, anticlimactically, that I just had anxiety. And what started there was the darkest phase that my life has ever known. For weeks I was on sleeping pills and experimenting with different medications until I realized that they were causing extremely depressive mood swings and almost hallucination-like thoughts that terrified me. And my emotional life just fell off a cliff. I remember one night being with my wife in the kitchen, and she was handing me some dishes, and I took them and I looked at her and I said, I don't know where these go. I really did. My presence and my sense of what was going on was fading so fast. I entered a time where I had to either take medication or drink alcohol and fall asleep. And it scared me deeply. And I think mental illness and bouts with it are so complicated, so I firmly do not intend to oversimplify. But I equally firmly believe that one thing, very important thing that was happening, is that my body and my heart were finally being converted to what my practices were teaching them, the anxiety and the busyness. And I wish I could tell you this was an easy fix, but it was not at all. It was a long, hard road to some extent that I'm still on. But one very important milestone along this road that you should know about is about 15 months afterwards, I am sitting at a bar in late December with two of my best friends, and on the table is a piece of paper, and on the piece of paper is some scribblings. And in those scribblings are some habits and rhythms that my wife and I put together to try to get me back to a place of health. That was the beginning of not only the common rule, but of a new man. Those habits of spiritual formation drastically changed, and are still drastically changing my life and my wife's life. I'm a humble man now, but I am a new man. And I tell you this story because I am very aware that in trying to convince you to live according to a communal program of habits could be taken as a productivity gimmick or as some sort of your best life now trick. But I want you to know that my approach to this whole thing has not been some march of triumph. It was a stumble of humility. And it was not a solo, and is not a solo self-improvement project. It is a communal endeavor born out of the friends and family who tied their lives to mine and really pulled me out of a very dark time. I want you to know that what began as a way to save my life has now become a way to live my life. And I'm never going back. And so that's my story, and I know it's a personal one, but I know that it is not an unusual one. Unfortunately, it is not unusual. You too are a product of your habits. You too are a product of your habits far more than you are a product of your hopes. And the problem is that everybody is, and it's so normal that we don't even see it. All right, so in 2005, May 21st, David Foster Wallace, whom some of you know, American novelist, gave his famous, almost instantly famous, graduation speech at Kenyon College, in which he began with this story. The speech was called "This is Water," and he said there are two fish swimming along in the ocean, and an older fish swims by, and he says, "Hey boys, how's the water?" And after the two fish swim on for a while, one turns to the other and says, what the hell is water? And his point being, as Wallace put it so well, the most obvious, ubiquitous, and important realities are often the ones that are the hardest to see and talk about. So listen closely. Here's my claim about habits. Most of our lives are being completely disordered by modern American habits that are unconscious, and we are powerless to do anything about it until we consciously see the water and give it a name. So what helped me in this process of seeing the water was, for me, it was coming back from being a missionary in China. When I came home 5 years ago, to find that to a large extent there was no home. I've been so bent by my experience in China that I never felt, or at least to this day, I felt that I've been able to straighten up in a way that I fit quite in here. But that helps me see the water. I don't think you need that. I think you can look at the Bible and see that the scriptures call us strangers and aliens, ambassadors, foreigners and exiles in their own country all the time. And to the extent we start to realize that we actually are exiles and strangers in this place, that this is not our home, then we start to see all the strange things that are actually happening here, and they are strange. Contrary to what this place might like you to believe about its neutrality and its secularity, this place is full, America is full of bizarre rituals of worship. And David Foster Wallace, as well as Tim Keller and many of our other pastors in every other sermon, make this point. And David Foster Wallace stated in the speech that I quoted, he said, you don't get the choice whether or not to worship. The only, right? And this all clicked for me in a new and important way after my anxiety crash, when I started reading a philosopher named Jamie Smith, a Christian American philosopher's books. And he took the point further, and he explained that it's not just that we all worship, it's that our most important worship occurs in our most ordinary of habits. And he calls these cultural liturgies, which is a great term, if a little wordy. It's a great term because he gets to the point that our most regular and ordinary routines that we go about through in our day, and all Americans also do, are actually liturgies of worship to something. The question, again, is just, what is it? And as David Foster Wallace would encourage you, choose carefully, because whatever you worship, it will eat you alive. As the psalmist encourages us, choose carefully, because those who make and trust in idols will become like them. So let me just illustrate practically how, in my life, before my anxiety crash, how I think my habits were modes of worship for me. Habit 1, wake up every day short on sleep, because I never go to bed on time. Formation of worship. I am not a creature. I am infinite. My body will be fine. I am God. Habit 2. Look at work emails first thing for a while before getting out of bed. Formation of worship. I can miss a quiet time, but I cannot miss a quick response. If I'm not well regarded in my office, then I am not worth much. All right, habit 3. Being busy is normal. To be busy is to be important. The habit is grab breakfast on the go. Everybody else is leaving late. Hurry to my office. Eat at the desk. The formation of worship is being busy is normal. To be busy is important. In order to stay important, I need to say yes to everything and never say no to anything. Habit. Keep alerts on my phone and computer on and in sight while I work. Formation of worship. I need to know what's going on out there. The most important thing is the most recent headline, meme, urgent request. In order to love my neighbor, I need to be updated. I don't need to do good focused work. So let me stop there. Not even 10 a.m., right? And by not doing anything, I am being rigorously formed in omniscience and omnipresence. By not choosing, I'm letting all these cultural liturgies choose for me. And it strikes me now that denying all of these limitations, acting like I was a creature without limitations, no wonder my body fell apart. No wonder that my heart was rebelling. Living in this kind of American water has consequences, right? And you're probably seeing, all right, this guy does too much. Yeah. And maybe you share that, or maybe you fall off the other end of being too lazy. But I want to tell you that they're the same side. They're the same coin of pride. Right? There are two sides to it. And, maybe you struggle with sloth. Maybe you struggle with trying to do too much. Maybe you go in and out of them. But I would equally warn that other type of person that type of person is also absolutely flattened under the tidal wave of modern American technological habits, of video games, of social media, of streaming media. this stuff has consequences for us, okay? But it also, maybe more importantly, has consequences for our neighbors. I was walking out of a coffee shop on Friday morning and I almost ran into a man who was iPhone in one hand, earbud in one ear, fidget spinner in one hand, and a cigarette in the other fingers that wasn't holding this fidget spinner. And I almost ran into him, and then trying to make light of the awkward encounter, I said, "Is that one of those fidget spinner things? I just heard about this." And he looked at me, and immediately the lightheartedness was taken away, and I saw that his eyes were red and raw. And he just, almost like a child, almost sort of scared, said, I have a lot of anxiety, and I can't put it down if I'm awake. Almost like an apology. As I walked away, I thought, my God, this is the best we can give these people, an earbud and a spinner, a pack of cigarettes, and an endless stream of media to distract them from the rumble of suffering that threatens to take everything they have at any moment. And I never would have cared for this man, except that a few years ago, I was that man, standing outside my own house with my pack of cigarettes and a drink, with my mind spinning and my fingers tapping and my heart empty. I was not thinking about how to love God and neighbor. I was thinking, what is going to happen to me? And it is one thing for us who believe in God to be completely disordered by modern American habits, because worldview and community are so important. And to some extent, they do give us a buffer when we fall. I'm not saying it's a pretty picture. I think we end up wanting to be closer to the Lord and not really knowing how, or maybe refusing to do anything about it. We sort of bounce back and forth between apathy and guilt. But I want you to think about the plight of so many of our neighbors. Their lives, like ours, are completely disordered by modern American habits. And their minds are completely deconstructed by modern worldviews that insist there is no meaning. All right, and so they bounce back and forth between their despair and their coping. And I want to ask us, would we blame them? Or would we go love them? The folk artist Conor Oberst sings, the modern world is a sight to see. It's a stimulant. It's pornography. And it takes all my will not to turn it off. So Van Gogh never did find his light, and he turned it off. David Foster Wallace never found his light, and he turned it off. And these, brothers and sisters, are our neighbors. These are the people beside us. And while it is true that these Americans are almost immune to verbal proclamations of the gospel, they are nonetheless, I am convinced, searching the valley looking for a house with the lights on. And we know that answer. All right? John 1:3, in Christ was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. And this light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. So here then is my vision for the modern American church, that by embracing communal, counterformative spiritual disciplines, we might actually be able to reflect the light of Christ in our beliefs and in our habits, and become a missional community of people who right here in our own strange land of exile turn the lights back on. So, how would we do that? Let me introduce you to one way I think that this could happen, and that is what you have in your chair, the common rule. You can follow along, if you cannot follow along, I'm just going to guide you through some of the habits. So my proposal is that by following some kind of program of spiritual formation, we get counterformative habits to actually guide our lives in the love of God and neighbor. So to start with, we frame our day in love. All right? When we wake up in the morning, this is a habit of embrace. This is kneeling prayer. When we wake up in the morning, we don't just immediately start scheming about, what do I need to do today? What do I need to do to justify my existence today? No, we get down on our knees and we pray. This is a keystone habit. By framing the day in times of kneeling prayer, we punctuate the sentence. All right? We order the syntax of the day towards meaning. That meaning being the love of God, not towards our own self-serving endeavors. And this meaning continues into midday. I often notice the point midday where I really need to stop and pray because I start longing for a second cup of coffee, or I start wanting to search the internet for what, I'm not sure, I just want to search. And I'm looking down the barrel of the afternoon and I'm thinking about all the things that I know I'm not going to get done today. And I see failure, and I see condemnation, and I see I'm not living up to it again today. That's when I need to stop and pray. Often not more than 60 seconds. I might pray for a coworker, I might pray for a client or an employee of a client. Doesn't matter. Just stop and pray. And then as the evening approaches, we think, all right, how are we going to end this thing? We're going to lay down in bed and let the replay reels go? Are we going to search some current event on our iPhone, some scandal to bounce around in our brain like an angry pinball? Are we going to, worse, and I'm going to search the dark corners of the internet for some last bit of ungodly pleasure? No, we're going to stop and place the period of God's mercy at the end of the day. We made it through another one. He is good, and we thank Him. It doesn't matter if we feel spiritual or not. It's just habit. All right, but we don't just frame the day in the order of God's love. We also frame the day in the order of love of others. And one of the best ways to do this is to commit. At one of these meals today, I'm going to give my presents to somebody else. I'm going to be with somebody else. And this is an amazing thing because speaking of keystone habits, do you ever think of how much food says about our life? All right, when I spend my day with a breakfast on the go and lunch at my desk and then takeout in front of a screen, it signals that I am either ordering my day towards busyness or laziness, which, as we discussed, are both pride. But I'm certainly not ordering it towards the love of others. And one of the best habits, I think, to leverage the day away from this inward curve to self and towards this outward curve to others is just to eat with somebody. To be the person in your office who takes somebody out to lunch and just talks. And if you're a parent of young children, like I am, you might be thinking, like I often do, oh, how I would love to have a meal with them. I have 3 small boys, 5 and under, and I get it, but I want you to get that mealtime, and I learned this from my mom and dad who are here tonight, meal times are a time of habit teaching, a time of formation. Just think about how much love and habits of love are communicated around the table. All right, we learn to share, we learn to serve. We learn to say please. We learn to give thanks. We learn to tell a story, to ask a question. Right? The Christians have described for generations the household as a school of love. The idea that what's going on here is not just living together. It's actually kind of formation. We become people together. And if our routine precludes any sort of meaningful time to sit together and interact, then we might ask, what is this school of? Is it of busyness? Is it of anger? Are we just teaching each other to be hurried and be worried? And don't get me wrong, my dinners with my 3 boys are paragons of chaos most nights. However, every once in a while, one of my sons will say, so Papa, how was your day? And I know they're imitating my wife, and I know that something is going right. So those are the daily rhythms of embrace. And now I want to turn to the daily rhythms of resistance. This is where we say no to the default formation in cultural liturgies of excess, selfishness, consumerism. And the first thing that we do is that we read Scripture before we look at our phone. This is the daily rhythm of resistance that is intended to block the stream of chaos that comes knocking at our heart's door through our phone. And instead, ask what the story of love in the Bible might have to guide our day first. So we come back to the habit of waking up. We ask, what are we looking for? What are we baptizing the day in as soon as we get up? Are we going to baptize ourselves in the story of work emails and all the things that we need to do to make ourselves worth it today? Or is it going to be the story of God's love for us as revealed in the Psalms? Maybe it's going to be the story of the epistles, sovereignty. Or it's going to be the story of dramatic headlines that are actually designed to teach us worry so that we stew on it all day and come back for the evening news just to get a little more concerned. We need to know about the world in order to love our neighbors, okay? But I submit that the best way to love the vulnerable people out there that so rarely make it to the news headlines is probably something else. It might be social media. It might be we're starting our days with the well-curated story of everybody else's life. So much travel, so pretty, so much food. Wish my life was different. We need to know how to use social media well. We really do. But we don't need to start our day in its skewed stories when our minds and our hearts are tired and we don't have any guard up. All right, so to resist these things, because we are being formed in these things, we start with the story of God's love for us, however briefly. That's the first thing. To stay on the subject of these dangerous things called smartphones, I'm going to turn to the daily habit of resistance that pushes us towards our neighbors. And that's the habit of just resisting absence by turning off your phone or putting it away for 2 hours a day. So in order to get this and why it matters, you got to understand that the presence of God is at the heart of all things, right? This is what we're looking for. This is what we're made for. We were made for presence. This is why you can't just be in love. You got to be with the one you love. This is why your children say, play with me. And this is why solitary confinement destroys the image of God in people, because we're meant to be with each other. This is why community development people will tell you, you can't just help the poor, you got to be with the poor. All right, we were made for presence. But how often is it that our phones become the reason that we are around each other, with each other, but not present to each other? So this is why turning off your phone, putting it away in the car, drawer, or something for 2 hours a day actually allows us to look into the face of the person that God would have us love and be present to them. All right, so maybe it is in the morning so you can love your neighbors by doing some hours of focused work. Maybe it's leading a great conference call. Maybe do it in the evening so that you can actually be looking at your child when he or she looks up and asks the next inane, repetitive question that otherwise would bother you, except you are actually there with them, ready to answer. Or maybe it's that we simply spend an evening in this revolutionary, rare commodity called silence. So Blaise Pascal wrote that all of humanity's ills stem from man's inability to sit in a quiet room alone. That is, how much more true is it today? We live in a time where we can continually avoid the confrontation of our conscience or the still small voice of God precisely because the heart is never quiet. And I imagine sometimes, what if Martin Luther King Jr. was de-stressing by punching things into his phone after the death threats? So he was never quiet enough to hear the voice of God in his kitchen that night that said, stand up for justice, stand up for truth, and I will be with you always. What love for neighbors we would have missed. So we resist absence in order to give our neighbors our presence. All right, so now I'm going to move to the weekly habits. And staying on the acts of resistance, let me turn to the weekly rhythm, the totally unfashionable but utterly transformative rhythm of fasting, which is designed to confront us with our deep, searching need for God. All right, so as I tried to talk about earlier, we live in a strange land, a weird place where we can actually go from comfort to comfort to comfort, almost believing that this world has everything we need, almost believing that maybe after all, man can live by bread alone. All right, so we go to fasting because it normally takes some unexpected suffering to jolt us out of that, much like my story. And we go to fasting because that's what fasting is. It's suffering, except it's repeated suffering. It's habitual suffering. It's planned suffering. See, to fast is to feel crummy. All right? To fast is to deny yourself the emotional comfort of the snack or the lunch out. To fast is to confront the fact, for me, that I am not actually a very joyful, good-natured person. I am an angry, mean person who medicates with food and drink. And when I confront that in fasting, I realize, and we realize, how thin our souls actually are and how much we actually need the bread of life to sustain us. But it's not just to confront our need, it's also to look into the world's need for God. Okay, to fast is to be in solidarity with all the suffering of the world. It's to be in solidarity with the kids over that way in Richmond who don't actually have enough food or healthy enough food. It's to know the pain and to be in solidarity with the Syrian refugee who's in a hell camp and has no one inviting them out of it. All right, to fast is to remember that in your office and in your pews are people fighting life and death battles with depression. All right, so we are rejecting in fasting this terrible fairy tale that everything is fine. Because it's not. We and our neighbors live in a world of suffering that longs for the redemption by its Savior. So we fast in order to resist the idea that the world is comfort. For similar reasons, we practice the weekly habit of limiting screen entertainment. All right, so the common rule suggests that we limit our hours spent in front of screen stories so that we can turn outward to the world. All right, and when I talk about screen stories, I'm aware I'm getting into this is tough territory because I love them as much as you do. I mean everything from news to Netflix to movies. This is not because stories are important. This is because stories are so important. All right, I'm sure that you know stories shape the world. All right, they teach us what it means to live the good life way more than any Sunday school that I've ever been to. They teach us what it means to be human. So we need to pick our stories really carefully. But it's all but impossible to choose our stories carefully when the medium now exists in a form that is specifically designed to get you to watch the next one, stick around for the next one, click on the next link, follow up for the sequel. The words of Marshall McLuhan, a media critic, some 50, 60 years ago, said, "The medium is the message." All right, and I think Christians, as loving social critics, which we should be picking apart the medium of these news blogs, the medium of these Netflix series, equally, if not more, than we're picking apart their worldview. This medium will turn us away from each other. And it is well placed, you know and I know, it is well placed to spend an evening with your spouse or your friends watching a series, watching a movie, engaging with culture, as it were. But we must realize that is not the way that they intended to happen. It is supposed to be every night, and it so easily becomes every night until we are always sitting on a couch looking at a screen and hardly ever sitting at a table looking at each other. So this is important for our formation, but how much more important is it for the neighbors, the vulnerable, who need our attention, but whose stories so rarely cut through the white noise of the constant stream of media? There's a neighborhood right above mine where poor and almost entirely African-American children live in a war zone kind of violence and poverty. And I don't care. Because what I do care about is the problems of the Washington Nationals bullpen. Because that is what's making it to my phone every night. What does that say about my capacity to adjust to injustice? So, to be people who love our neighbors, we need to choose good stories. And at some point we need to turn them off and look out into the world where our neighbors actually live. And finally, we look at the weekly grooves we want to dig in our lives. These are the weekly patterns of embrace where we are inviting the love of God and neighbor to run. The first being the weekly habit of 1 hour of intentional conversation with friends. This is a way to practice embrace of the thing that we so desperately need to make it in this world, friendship. It has always been true that we need friends. Of course, God made us that way. Adam, in the garden with God, was lonely until God gave him his first friend, in Eve. But how much more do we need it in a place where we are encouraged to curate all the best moments of our life online and simultaneously allowed to have a completely secret existence? How much more do we need a friend who sees the whole thing, who knows the uncurated version, and hears the secrets that we spend the rest of our lives so desperately trying to hide? So we looked at the practice of 1 hour of weekly intentional conversation to be the bearers of the gospel to each other, to say, I know it all. I'm sticking around anyway. Because that's the gospel. That's what Christ does to us. And think of your neighbors. Many of us in our American neighborhoods could search the streets all day long for a man fallen in the road, longing to be the Good Samaritan. And we wouldn't find one. But should we make it past our neighbor's front door and into their kitchen, then we find the mass of men and women who live, like us, our lives of quiet desperation. And there is no antidote and medication to the anxiety and the depression that riddles the common American, like a friend who comes back to talk week after week and tell the truth. And we end on the beginning with the weekly embrace of God's love in Sabbathing. Appropriate to end on because in Sabbath we stop. We do nothing. For one day we rest and we bask in the reality that we don't need to strive because God in Jesus Christ has already strived for us. We bask in the reality that we don't need to accomplish because God has in Jesus Christ accomplished for us. And there is no better rebuke to the age of anxiety and busyness than we live in than just to turn it off and say, for one day, my office will survive without my emails. And guess what? They will. And for one day, I don't need to post any content. Because guess what? The world is fine. Even the most important of us can disappear, and we find that the world goes on. But we're Christ, the sustainer of all things that disappear. Everything you and I love, all our hopes, all our dreams, our families, in this place would just pop, fizzle, like a cut TV signal. So we stop to know that it's Christ who sustains all things. And And this is the appropriate place to end all of this, because here we embrace the love of God simply by doing nothing. And if you are new at all this, or this is the first time you've heard about something like the common rule, it may, incorrectly, but it very likely may sound like a lot. It may sound intimidating. It may be stressing you out right now, thinking, how am I going to fit all this in my life? And just a brief challenge and a brief encouragement. The challenge being, if you are worried about, like, oh, this sounds nice, how would I ever fit this in? I want you to think about, with what is your schedule so jam-packed? And is that what you want to do? Is it what you're choosing to do? Is it the way you want your life to go? Because most of us, if you're like me, aspire to something much more beautiful. But we don't quite understand how to make the abstract aspirations into concord in all these cultural liturgies that form our days. And as Annie Dillard wrote, how we spend our days is, of course, how we spend our lives. But look, by not attending to our formation, we are doing too much, way too much. And these cultural liturgies, their yokes are heavy, right? And their burdens are not light. But my encouragement would be just to comfort you that at the heart of any program of spiritual formation, whether it's this one or another one, these are not wake-up calls to fix your life. These are lullabies so that you can rest in the fact that someone else has fixed your life. All right? These are not ways of legalism because they push us into grace. I'll tell you what are ways of legalism. All the other cultural liturgies that we encounter throughout the day, those will push you into legalism. Those do push me into legalism. And we need some way to counterform ourselves to see that Christ has freed us from all that. So I really do actually try to live like this. It's taken me years. It happened because of crisis. And I, at best, am a wobbly approximation of it all. But I'll tell you what, that doesn't bother me a bit. I don't care about it. This is not a checklist. Because I'm finally not proving myself. I'm just after a way of peace that for so long was so elusive. Let me end by going back to Van Gogh's Starry Night. This possessed man on the verge of suicide, painting his longing for the divine in the stars. I want you to see that you and I and our neighbors are more Van Gogh-like than ever before. We are looking for the light. We are looking in the valley, trying to find it, when everything around us is just turning us inward, and all we see is darkness. So my charge to us is that we try to answer Van Gogh's question by matching up our habits to our beliefs. And I hope that in practicing the art of habit, we don't just find the presence of God. I hope we find our neighbors too. I hope that our houses become little missional monasteries, open to all the tired, all the weary, all the scared. I hope that our church communities and our friend communities become blazing fires of warmth in this long, cold, cultural winter, open to all who would have it. And I hope that our lives and our beliefs and our habits start to reflect the light of Christ, so that, as Paul writes, we would shine like the stars, hanging like those light that Van Gogh was looking for. Thank you.